The night was electric with anticipation as two warriors stepped into the ring, each determined to leave their mark on boxing history. One, a lightning-fast British sensation, known for his explosive speed and sharp combinations. The other, a seasoned American champion, a fighter who had faced some of the toughest opponents in the world, with a reputation for resilience and power. This was no ordinary fight. This was a battle between two contrasting styles, two fighters with everything to prove. The stakes were high, and the tension in the air was palpable. Amir Khan, with his dazzling footwork and fast hands, had already made waves in the boxing world, rising from humble beginnings to become one of the sport's brightest stars. But despite his undeniable talent, Khan's journey had been filled with ups and downs. There were questions about his chin, doubts about his ability to handle pressure when it mattered most. Still, Khan's name was synonymous with exciting, high-paced boxing. His explosive performances in the ring had earned him a dedicated fan base and the respect of many. But would he finally overcome the mental and physical hurdles standing in his way? On the other side of the ring stood Devon Alexander, a man who had been there, done that, and beaten some of the best. The great Alexander was no stranger to adversity. From his victories in world title fights to his battles with personal demons, Alexander had proven time and again that he had the heart of a true champion. With his tight defense, quick reflexes, and impressive technique, Alexander was considered one of the most well-rounded fighters in the division. But as he faced the younger, faster Khan, could he rise to the occasion one more time and prove that his prime wasn't behind him? The night was set, the crowd roaring as the fighters made their way to the ring, the spotlight shining on them as they prepared to lock horns. The fans had waited months for this moment, for the clash of two boxing titans with vastly different strengths and weaknesses. Khan, the flashy and lightning-fast challenger, against Alexander, the gritty and skilled veteran. Every punch, every slip, every move would determine the outcome of this epic showdown. But as the bell rang and the fighters closed in, a question loomed over the entire match. Who would take control of the fight? Would Khan's speed and precision be enough to outpace Alexander's technique and power, or would the veteran find a way to impose his will and prove that experience trumps youth? As the rounds wore on, the fight unfolded in ways no one could have predicted. There were moments of brilliance from both men, but also times when it seemed like one might falter under the immense pressure. Would Khan's confidence be his biggest asset, or would his vulnerability surface at the worst possible time? Would Alexander's resilience and grit give him the edge in this back-and-forth battle, or would his age start to show in the later rounds? The outcome was still unknown, and the crowd was on the edge of their seats, waiting for that one pivotal moment that would shift the momentum. What would happen next? Would the fight continue to unfold with shocking twists and turns, or was something about to change the course of the match entirely? One thing was certain: this wasn't just another boxing match. This was a fight that would define careers and leave an unforgettable mark on the sport. As the tension built, the question remained: who would emerge victorious in this unforgettable showdown? Each movement inside the ring told a story, a glimpse into years of sacrifice, discipline, and the relentless pursuit of greatness. Amir Khan, with his quicksilver reflexes, bounced on his toes, his gloves positioned high, eyes locked onto his opponent. Devon Alexander, composed and calculating, studied his rival's rhythm, his footwork measured, waiting for the right moment to strike. The early exchanges set the tone: a battle of speed versus precision, youth versus experience. Every jab, every feint, every slip of the head carried the weight of their respective careers. This wasn't just about winning. It was about proving something to themselves, to their teams, to the world watching. Khan had spent his life in the ring, rising through the ranks with an almost unnatural speed. His journey from an Olympic silver medalist to a world champion had been a spectacle in itself. His dazzling performances had often silenced critics, but doubts lingered. Could he maintain control under fire? Could he take the kind of punches that separated good fighters from legends? His past defeats had haunted him, moments where everything had been going his way until one single shot changed the course of the fight. Yet, Khan never shied away from a challenge, never backed down from the kind of fights that defined legacies. Against Alexander, he had everything to gain and just as much to lose. For Devon Alexander, this fight carried an entirely different meaning. His career had been one of perseverance, of proving doubters wrong at every turn. Growing up in St. Louis, Missouri, boxing had been more than just a sport for him. It had been his way out. He had climbed his way to world titles with a style that was both technically sound and difficult to break down. But the road hadn't always been smooth. Injuries, setbacks, and personal struggles had threatened to derail his momentum, yet he had always found a way back. Now, standing across from Khan, he wasn't just fighting to win, he was fighting to remind everyone, including himself, that he still belonged among the best. Outside the ring, the stakes were just as high. The boxing world was watching closely, from analysts debating tactics to fans arguing over who had the edge. Some believed Khan's speed would overwhelm Alexander, that his relentless pace would be too much to handle. Others pointed to Alexander's patience, his ability to adjust mid-fight and capitalize on mistakes. In a sport where one moment could change everything, neither fighter could afford a misstep. The first few rounds played out like a high-speed chess match. Khan, as expected, dictated the pace early on, using his rapid combinations to keep Alexander on the defensive. But Alexander was no stranger to dealing with fast opponents. He absorbed the pressure, countered smartly, and made small adjustments, forcing Khan to think twice before lunging in. With each passing minute, the tension grew. The crowd roared with every clean punch landed, every slick defensive maneuver. The energy inside the arena was electric, but there was an unshakable sense that something was about to shift. As the fight progressed, subtle changes began to emerge. Alexander started timing Khan's attacks, finding openings in the relentless flurries. His punches weren't thrown in volume, but when they landed, they carried weight. Khan, known for his aggression, had to be careful. One mistake could cost him everything. His team shouted instructions from the corner, urging him to stay sharp, to stick to the game plan. But in fights like these, instincts often took over. For those watching, the fight had become more than just a contest of skill. It was a test of will. Both men had something to prove, and neither was willing to take a step back. Each round became more intense than the last, the battle growing more brutal as fatigue set in. Sweat dripped, breathing became heavier, but neither fighter showed signs of slowing down. What would be the turning point? Would Khan's speed remain the deciding factor, or was Alexander waiting for the perfect moment to shift the fight in his favor? The questions lingered as the war inside the ring raged on, every second drawing them closer to an inevitable moment that could change everything. Momentum in a fight is a dangerous thing. It shifts like a tide, unpredictable, often uncontrollable, and when it turns, there's no telling what might happen next. Amir Khan had started strong, his speed causing problems for Devon Alexander, but something was changing. The rhythm of the fight, once dictated by Khan's lightning-fast hands, was beginning to slow, and that played right into Alexander's game. He had spent the early rounds studying, adapting, making adjustments that were almost imperceptible to the untrained eye. Now, little by little, those adjustments were making all the difference. Khan was still throwing, still moving, but his punches weren't landing as cleanly as they had in the opening rounds. Alexander had started slipping just a fraction more, making him that much harder to hit. And then, for the first time, he took a step forward, pressing into Khan's space. It wasn't reckless aggression. Alexander was too smart for that. It was calculated, deliberate, a sign that he had begun to see openings. A left hook snapped Khan's head to the side, a punch that wasn't enough to drop him, but enough to let him know that Alexander was still very much in this fight. In Khan's corner, there was a flicker of concern. They had seen this before. A fight that started in his favor, but slowly began to slip through his fingers. He needed to stay composed, but that was never his style. Khan thrived in chaos, but against someone like Alexander, chaos could be a trap. Another exchange came, and this time Alexander caught him again, a right hand down the middle that forced Khan to reset. The crowd felt the shift. The energy inside the arena was different now, a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. But just as it seemed like Alexander was taking control, the fight took an unexpected turn. In the middle of the ring, Khan feinted with his left, drawing Alexander's guard up for just a moment. It was a small reaction, but that was all Khan needed. He exploded forward, launching a blistering combination that landed flush. A left-right left too fast to react to sent Alexander stumbling backward, his balance momentarily lost. The roar from the crowd was deafening as Khan, sensing the moment, rushed in to capitalize. Alexander, ever the veteran, did what seasoned fighters do. He held, wrapping his arms around Khan to smother the attack. The referee quickly stepped in to separate them, giving Alexander precious seconds to recover. But the damage had been done. For the first time in the fight, Alexander looked vulnerable. Khan bounced on his toes, a renewed confidence in his movement. He had found his opening, and now the question was whether he could finish what he had started. But just when it seemed like Khan was in complete control again, Alexander did something that no one expected. Instead of retreating, instead of playing it safe, he stepped right back into the fire. He planted his feet and threw a counter that landed flush, a perfectly timed shot that stunned Khan for the briefest of moments. It wasn't enough to put him down, but it was enough to send a message this fight wasn't over. The exchange left both men breathing heavier, their bodies showing the signs of battle. Sweat dripped, gloves were raised, and the intensity inside the ring had reached an entirely new level. Each man had felt the other's power, had been forced to adjust and adapt, but now the fight had entered a different phase. It was no longer just about skill, it was about heart, about who could dig deeper when it mattered most. As the next round began, the tension was unbearable. The crowd knew they were witnessing something special, a battle that could turn at any second. But the real question remained. Who would be the one to land the punch that changed everything? Every second inside the ring felt heavier now, as if time itself had slowed under the weight of what was unfolding. Amir Khan and Devon Alexander stood across from each other, bodies worn from battle, eyes locked in a silent acknowledgement of the war they had waged. There was no doubt that this was one of those fights, one that tested more than just skill. This was about will, about endurance, about who could withstand the storm just a little longer. The crowd could feel it, the tension thick enough to hold everyone in their seats, waiting for the moment that would decide everything. Khan, still moving with speed despite the punishment he had taken, darted in with a sharp jab, then another. He was relentless, not giving Alexander the space he needed to set his feet. But Alexander, always composed, didn't take the bait. He waited, slipping just enough to stay out of danger while keeping his counters ready. And then, in a split second, it happened. Khan threw another rapid combination, his fists a blur, But Alexander saw his chance. Timing it perfectly, he dipped under the final shot and fired a counter right-hand short, precise, devastating. The impact sent a shock through Khan's legs, and for a brief moment, his balance wavered. The crowd erupted as Alexander pressed forward, knowing this was his window. He followed up with a crushing left, forcing Khan back into the ropes. Khan, his instincts kicking in, did what he had done so many times before he fought back. He refused to go down, throwing wild, desperate punches to keep Alexander from closing in further. The referee watched closely, aware that one more clean shot could end everything. But Khan, showing the heart that had defined his career, managed to escape, pivoting away just as Alexander looked to finish him off. The roar from the audience was deafening, as if they couldn't believe what they were seeing. Then, just as quickly as it had turned in Alexander's favor, the momentum shifted again. Khan, now with space, did what he did best, used his speed to launch a blistering attack. He caught Alexander clean with a hook, then a straight right that sent the veteran stumbling for the first time in the fight. The tables had turned once more. The entire arena was on its feet, the intensity reaching its peak. The final moments of the fight were pure chaos. Both men, exhausted but unwilling to yield, traded shots at a furious pace. It was no longer about strategy. It was about who had more left in the tank, who could dig deeper. Every punch thrown carried everything they had left. The sound of leather connecting echoed through the arena, each shot a reminder of what was at stake. And then the final bell rang. The war was over. Both fighters, battered and bruised, stood in the center of the ring, breathing heavily, their faces marked with the proof of the battle they had just endured. There was no instant celebration, no immediate reaction, just a shared look between two warriors who had given everything. The judges' scorecards were read, the tension stretching for one final moment. And when the winner's name was announced, the reaction was explosive. Some cheered, others gasped, but no one could deny what they had just witnessed. This wasn't just a fight, it was a statement. A night that would be remembered long after the final bell. As they left the ring, both men knew they had been part of something special. Titles could change hands, records could be debated, but some fights were bigger than wins and losses. This was one of those fights. And no matter what came next, their names would forever be linked by the war they had just fought.